We will invite Dr. Athavale, founder of Maharshi Adhyatma Vishwavidyalay in India. She will talk about a spiritual approach to climate change and its solutions.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. We
Great.
can hear you.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. I'm Sean, and I represent the Maharshi Adhyatma Vishwavidyalay. I think we are all aware that the Earth's vital signs are not in a good shape. And the year 2020 was actually the warmest year on record. Sorry, just give me a moment. I'm having a bit of... Okay. CO2 levels are at their highest ever. And the September Arctic ice is now declining. The intensity of the extreme weather events and natural disasters are on the rise. And needless to say that it is a cause for alarm for our generation and the children's generations, as climate is being viewed as an existential threat to humanity, just second to a full-blown nuclear war. Yet there is still a debate about climate change and what is causing it. The fifth assessment report of the IPCC stated that human influence is the dominant cause of global warming changes. However, there are people who feel that it may be due to natural causes such as increased solar activity, volcanic eruptions, ocean currents. But more importantly, do we as the human race have what it takes to arrest this climate change? Currently, we are fighting a losing battle. And the question is, should we be trying something else? And how will this end? Climate computer models are only as good as the assumptions that go into them. And they have hundreds of assumptions. All it takes is one assumption to be wrong for the forecast to be completely way off. Now, the research team at the university, led by His Holiness Dr. Athavale, has 40 years of spiritual research experience. And the university specializes in conducting research into how the spiritual dimension and spiritual vibrations affect our lives. And if there is one thing we have learned from our research, it is that when investigating the causes of any phenomenon, one needs to also include the spiritual dimension. This is because the cause of any phenomenon can have its root in the physical, psychological, and/or the spiritual dimension. And this applies to climate change as well. Now, normally experts would look only at the physical causes when investigating climate change. But we have found that the main cause of climate change is due to spiritual reasons. This research has been conducted using advanced sixth sense along with aura and energy scanners, and I'm here to share with you our findings. The nature of the universe is that it goes through cycles and mini cycles. At a micro level, we see such cycles in a day-to-day period, such as a 24-hour period where there is night and day, and both of them have their own spiritual properties. Nighttime is filled with considerably more spiritually impure vibrations as compared to the daytime. Now, just like this, Earth, at a larger level, also undergoes cyclical changes that are primarily spiritual in nature. When the spiritual vibrations are less positive or more negative, it has negative ripple effects on all of creation. Now, the negativity in the environment changes the proportion of the three subtle basic components. And as per the science of spirituality, there are three subtle components of the universe, namely Sattva, Raja, and Tama. A predominance of the Sattva component instills spiritual knowledge and spiritual purity in a person. Raja incites action, and Tama induces spiritual ignorance and inertia. So whatever is the dominant spiritual component in any object so will be its vibrations. Now, due to this spiritual low point, people tend to behave in a manner that increases the spiritual negativity or spiritual pollution in the environment. The traits of people change for the worse, and there is an overall increase or decrease in people practicing spirituality, and there is an increase in people's personality defects, ego, and pride. Materialism. Materialism is the new religion, and there is a dominance of selfishness and greed and a basic disregard for the environment. In short, there is an increase in unrighteousness or dharma. Now, powerful negative energies in the spiritual dimension capitalize on this spiritual pollution in the environment and increase the spiritual negativity even further, affecting mankind. Now, this is important. Just as we spring clean our house to get rid of accumulated dirt, when there is an increase in the spiritual pollution or a lack of righteousness, then nature actively responds through the various forces of nature to restore the balance. This is not a new concept. This is something that has been explained to in ancient Sanskrit scriptures. For example, out here in the Charak Samhita, it states when there is an increase in unrighteousness or spiritual pollution, the signs are reflected in the reduced quality of life, increased epidemics or pandemics, a spate of natural disasters along with war and conflict, eventually leading to the annihilation of communities. A somber warning. So technically, this is what happens. When we are in the low phase of the cycle, the Rajatama components increase beyond a certain threshold level. The heightened spiritual impurity negatively impacts the 5 cosmic principles of earth, water, fire, air, and ether that controls the climate. As a result, the affected water, fire, air, and ether principles give rise to weird weather patterns and natural disasters. And this is a table which shows that the disasters that are caused by each cosmic principle. So if the absolute earth principle is negatively affected, it results in earthquakes. If the absolute water element is negatively affected, it can give rise to excess water such as floods or a lack of water such as a drought. So if we look at the causes of climate change from the point of view of spiritual research, which basically looks holistically at contributing factors, then this is the breakdown of factors. 98% of the causes are cyclical changes that Earth is going through over time. And only 2% is due to human behavior, which is actually a result of these cyclical changes. Now, it can be said that human behavior is really a manifestation of such cyclical changes. We are currently entering the lowest phase of this cycle, and this is inducing a lower form of behavior in society. So it is actually natural Earth cycles that are causing climate change, and I would like to emphasize that is not just due to greenhouse gases caused by humans, which is currently being considered as by scientists as the primary cause of climate change. Of the 2% that humans affect climate change, the physical aspect is so minor that it is almost negligible. This means that if we did everything that was agreed upon in the Paris Climate Change Agreement in 2015, we would still hardly dent the onslaught of climate change. So is there any way out of finding whether the world is actually spiritually polluted? So we conducted a landmark study of the subtle vibrations from soil and water samples from around the world. Actually, such an analysis can only be undertaken using one's sixth sense, which needs to be of an advanced level. However, nowadays, with the advancements of aura and subtle energy scanners, we are able to measure the subtle vibrations associated with objects to some extent. The instrument that we use to measure the soil and water samples is the universal aura scanner. And it is used to measure the subtle energy, positive and negative, and the aura around any object, living or non-living. As of February 2020, we have taken subtle readings of close to 1,000 soil samples and water samples from 32 countries, and we have found that apart from India, over 80% of the samples recorded have subtle negative vibrations. Also, there were instances where we procured samples from exactly the same place in 2018 and then in 2019. And what we observed was that the samples showed significant increases in negativity, anywhere between 100% to 500% increases in negative aura in just 1 year. In summary, the findings of the experiment indicated heightened levels of negativity spreading around the planet, and this included even religious sites. Now, I understand what I have said paints a very pessimistic view of the world, but unfortunately, that is only the half of it. In January 2021, scientists gave the world a dire warning, putting the symbolic doomsday clock at just 100 seconds to midnight. They warned that the world is at its closest to annihilation due to world leaders' poor response to threat of nuclear war, climate change, and the handling of the pandemic. From what we have gained through subtle knowledge, we concur with the view of world scientists. Devastation due to climate change is one part. The other part is that the selfishness of man is likely to result in war at an unprecedented scale. Actually, James Speth, an environmentalist, couldn't have put it any better when he said, I used to think that the top environmental problems were due to biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. And I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with this, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation, and we scientists don't know how to do that. So what can be done? Well, firstly, we have to understand that we are past the stage of debating about climate change, and we're actually at the stage of adapting to climate change. Since this cycle of the Earth is primarily spiritual in nature, the solutions for adaptation and protection should also be primarily spiritual in nature. The whole world, now, if the whole world were to practice spirituality as per universal principles, it would help to mitigate the devastating effect of heightened spiritual pollution. But alas, this utopian possibility is but a pipe dream. And therefore, we are all collectively on a road where we will have to witness much change and destruction. The practical reality is that in this situation is that each of us can only help ourselves. And this is best done by starting or increasing our spiritual practice. An easy yet effective form of spiritual practice is chanting the name of God. And what saints have guided is to chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya as the most spiritually beneficial chant for the current period up to 2023. On our website, we've actually provided 8 steps of spiritual practice that can be done. I encourage you to have a look at it. It'll really provide you with faster spiritual progress and also spiritual protection for the coming times. And lastly, when one undertakes spiritual practice sincerely, then God feels like protecting such a person. He's protected in the following ways. Now, either he gets the thought to leave that area before disaster strikes, or the fallout of a nuclear weapon, drifts in the opposite direction. And by doing so, we create positivity around us. And lastly, sages have said that, earnest efforts to increase spiritual growth will result in divine intervention of the protection of these people and devotees in turbulent times ahead. The bottom line is only by doing spiritual practice can one survive this difficult period. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your nice presentation. Actually, we got a lot from your this presentation because we also in Sri Lanka also we believe some spiritual things. So then, and when did you do researches like this? Do you do some case studies or something like that?
Yeah, so sir, basically what happens is, we did the soil and water sample study, which was almost 1,000 samples from all. And what was actually really alarming about it was that it showed a steady, if not dramatic, increase in negativity around the world. Now, this negativity, please understand, it's not about physical cleanliness
Yes.
or it's about spiritual uncleanliness.
How
That
can you
means
measure the negativity?
it's subtle negativity. That means spiritual negativity. That
Ah,
means, let's say, for example, if a person is angry or they have problems in their mind or
yes.
they are lots of greed or lots of materialism, that gives rise to negative vibrations. Now, if these negative vibrations reach a certain peak,
Mm.
nature starts to respond to correct this balance.
Yes.
This has been mentioned actually in many, many books, Charak Samhita being one of them, which I mentioned. But it is just the course of nature. It is a correction that has to happen, and nature does it. Now, unfortunately, along with nature,
Yeah.
nowadays mankind also has nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And this kind of temperament of man will only lead to his own destruction.
Mm. Yeah, we are in these days also we are in a pandemic situation. I think that is also given by the because of our so many bad behaviors, isn't
Exactly.
it?
No, and just imagine the pandemic is just a small little thing. It's a small little,
Ah,
germ that creates or virus that creates this problem, but the whole world has been affected.
yeah, affected. Yes, yes. Okay, thank you very much again for your presentation.
Thank you.